Hello there, it's Fiona from Weekly Sewing Bee. Okay, today we are going to copy round this fleece and we are going to make a duplicate of this fleece out of this material. Now this is sort of like a sleeping fleece. This is like a Sunday morning fleece. Now I've only got 1 metre of this fabric, so I might make it a bit shorter just so that I can finish it. And yeah. And the back's going to be the same, and the sleeves are going to be the same, and the sleeves are joined at the point rather than offset, and then the collar. So yeah, very simple shape. You know, we're talking a rectangle for the collar, and then 4 pretty much doof, 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 and maybe there. Okay, I'm going to get cutting and I'll be right back with you. Okay, so I've decided where I'm going to skim on fabric if I'm running short, and that's in the height of the garment. And I've made sure I've got my hemming allowance, but I just wanted to do a quick demonstration. You know, this fabric really, you can't sort of stretch it and cut because it just really mangles it. But if you cut it cleanly, then you have the ability to sew a garment without any form of hemming. Okay, well, first job. I always like to hem the bits that can be hemmed now. So, and this is just preference. Some of them you can easily hem afterwards, like the bottom of the sleeve. But I just like to do it now. I think it gives a lot cleaner, especially if you are going to go over and overlock the seams afterwards. So all I'm doing now, folding it over once, because it's fleece, it does bind. I don't need to hem it or anything, and just straight seam across the bottom. And yeah, it is quite thick. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same to the sleeves. Okay, so when we've done our hemming, we will just assume that I have finished this. I'm going to do the 2 bodies, and I'm going to hem the pocket top as well. So, now this was also an option that if I didn't have enough, I would leave this out. And all I'm going to do is, rather than cut this on the curb, I cut it straight. So I sew it, a couple of reverse stitches, and then follow it round, because actually on the jumper it's got kind of a curve to the pockets, so that's fine. Alright, when I'm happy with everything there, I'm then going to start sewing the seams together so that basically I've got the bits and then I can sew the bits together. So the next step is I need to take the body and I need to sew up the 2 side seams, and then I need to take the 2 sleeves and I need to sew up those edges. So make sure that everything's right side to right side, and obviously I'll have already hemmed this, and then it's just a line of stitches, done. Okay, so I'll get up to date with my sewing and then I'll come right back to you. Okay, before I start doing the rest of this, I just wanted to do an update really. I wanted to talk to you a bit more about the cutting because I forgot to say. So what we're going to need is a right and a left. So if we fold like that and then we can cut on the fold, then I know I've got 1 of each. So it is a case of, you know, just be aware that you're going to need a left and a right, yeah? So I don't think it comes up very clearly. And one day I'm going to buy a cloth that's got black on one side and white on the other, and I'll just sew it with red thread, and it'll be so much easier to explain everything. Okay, so where am I up to? I have hemmed the bottom of my top, and I have sewn the 2 side seams together. The pocket at the front, I've hemmed my corners. My neck I have sewn together, so it's just loop, and I've made sure it's big enough. my two sleeves, I have sewn down the long sleeve and I have hemmed the bottom with just one fold over. I've turned them inside out for the next step. I have my sewing machine, my trusty sewing machine. Now this works that I'm going to place my sleeve right side out inside my sweater, inside the top. Okay, so what I've got is I've got the blunt end there at the top, and I can mark that, both of those, with a pin. And then I've got my top here of that sleeve, and I need to sew down so that these two join together, and this is the point of both seams from the arm to the top of the body seam. Okay, so I've got those in place now, and in one long stitch I'm going to sew down the front and then round the back. Now with the neck seam, should I talk about that now? Oh, I don't know. So the neck seam we haven't measured at all. All I've done is I've made sure that I have a continuous strip of the fabric and that it is long enough to get round my head, because in a way I want it a bit tighter, so we may have to do some sort of pucking and pulling. Okay, so I'm now going back up the other side. I can remove the pin, and all I'm doing is making sure these two ends meet up. I've made sure the seam at the bottom meets up, and I'm making sure that the top meets up. Now, as we know, fleece is a stretch fabric, but we're not wearing it as a stretch fabric. We're wearing it as a fabric that's got a little bit of stretch in. So the stitches that I've chosen to use are not stretch stitch. They're just a normal, quite a loose stitch, so that if I do pull the garment, then I'm not going to rip the stitches. So same again, I've got my two seams at the bottom, the top of my body and the bottom of my underarm. I'm going to stick a pin, I'm going to go round the back, I'm going to join those two ends up, and I can either stick a pin in the front of it, or I can put it under my sewing machine and I can use that as third hand wiggly pin thing. Now, excluding the collar and the pocket, we now have a jumper. There's been the cutting, which can be a bit difficult, and I do kind of feel that maybe I should have cut in front of the camera. Basically I didn't, because I took it to the other room and cut it where there's a bit more room. But that's only because I needed to lie it flat, and I also needed to sort of go, well, if I cut the arms out here, I know I can't save any fabric from the arms, because other than the length, but not from the width of the arms, then yeah, so I knew that, and I really had to sort of lay it flat and wiggle it. But yeah, you just got to take your time, really. Take your time, especially with cutting. But yeah, sharp scissors, a must. Now, if I wanted to, or I was able to, I could go over this with an overlocker, yeah? And it's going to be these four seams, the one under the arm and the two at the sides. They're the only ones that would need doing. But, I'm not, so. Okay, I'll tuck those arms, it'll look a bit more clear. Let's get that out of the way. So we're still completely inside out. Now for this collar, what we need is we need to put the right sides to the right side. So it's inside out. I've got my seam facing me here. I want to go and join the point at the back of the neck to that seam, and I'm going to mark that with a pin. I'm going to find the centre of the front of the neck, and I'm doing that by folding it. I've got that firmly in my hand, and I'm going to take it to the inside of this, the front of the neck, and I'm going to mark it with a pin. Now the neck is smaller than the shoulders, okay? We know that because we want the neck to keep us warm. I'm going to take those two pins together and I'm going to find the quarter way round. I'm going to take these two seams, which are the top of my arm, I'm going to fold them in half and I'm going to find the halfway point. Then I'm going to mark the halfway between the top of the arm sleeve and the quarter way down of the neck loop, which is a continuous circle, and I'm going to mark that with a pin. Okay, so same again, front pin, back pin together, quarter way round, making sure that I don't twist this collar at any point, and then halfway between the fold of the arm. So now I have got equal measures so that it's not puckered, it's not all joined at the back of my neck. All I need to do, up, is sew around this continually. So at the moment this end is open. Now you can do this in one stage, which involves taking the raw edge of the top of your jumper and folding this over and then sewing it, but I'm going to do it in two stages. Now it's a circle, so it doesn't matter where you've started, and I'm going to take one pin out and place it under the sewing machine, and what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take out the next pin and I'm going to sew this amount of fabric to that pin. So let's get the machine going, and it has got a very slight gather on the jumper, which is fine. Okay. So I'm now to the point where the pin would have been. I'm going to go to my next pin and I'm going to sew to that point. So all you're doing is adjusting the fabric to equal points around. Now if you're taking in a huge amount of fabric, and I mean I'm only taking in probably a centimetre from the whole of the neck, then you can use as many pins as you like. I'm quite happy to sew a sort of gap of 6 inches unaided, and a lot of the time what I do is I adjust the next 6 inches and then I sew, and then I adjust the next 6 inches and then I sew. So this is working on the same principle, but because I haven't given myself an infinite amount of fabric, I have to adjust as I go. So now we're coming up to the end and I haven't got an excessive amount to gather. But I'm going to get the sewing machine to do that little bit, and then everything is gathered in. Just going to slow down a bit for this last inch, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to join up those two lines of stitches. I just think it looks so much nicer. Okay, I am turning the main body inside out. So this is the right way round. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to sew it on to here. Now it's going to be tricky It really is. And you can understand if you bought a mass-produced garment, what they would do is they would fold the collar over and then they would sew it all in one go here, and then they would sew it over with the overlocker. Now you can do that. You can fold it now and then sew over there, or you can take this seam, fold it over an inch and then sew again. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that this seam line at the back of the jumper is straight. I folded over an inch, I folded over half an inch and tucked that under, and now I'm placing it underneath the sewing machine. Now this is when I come back to, I'm going to sew just 4 inches at a time. So I've got that firmly in the machine. Before we start sewing any time, we're supposed to lower the needle because it's better for the machine. So I've lowered the needle so it's quite firmly there, and I've taken the next couple of inches and I'm just going to top sew that section. Now whenever you're doing this sort of thing, and you'll find it is just simple top sewing, you've got to be very careful that you don't stretch the top of the top sew. So you can either do it by watching what you're doing and being very gentle, or you can look out for telltale lines in the pattern of the design of the cloth. Or what I'm doing is I'm making sure that these lines are straight, because if I unstraighten them by pulling them, I would then have the problem that at the end of this collar it would be twisted and it would be pulled out of shape, and I would have no choice but to unpick it. So you can see that I'm not just telling you, I'm showing you that it's a possibility. I've just turned it over to do the next section, and I can see that if I keep this piece of fabric straight, then I've got this little buckle here, and that's because the machine is pushing the fabric out of the way, so in fact it's stretching it. So I can counteract that by just keeping the bottom in line with the top, and if I correct it quick enough, it won't damage the overall drape of the garment. So I'm on the next step. I've folded it over for my half an inch and I've made sure it's lined up, and then I'm sewing that half an inch. And even though I'm not particularly rushing, I am getting back towards the beginning. So I don't know what that was. Okay, try and keep it down so you can see. And there we go. If it comes off, I'm just going to steer it back in. Okay, so yes, I've really got to finish this now. And there we are, lined up, sew a little bit, line up some more. Now, so this is top stitching, and you would be using top stitching a lot. It's like a good tool to have in your sewing box, and because it's fleece, it's a good place to start, because all your stitches are now going to be hidden with the fluff of the fabric. Okay. Now, one of the things that can happen when you are sewing either fake fur or fleece is that you can just get too much fabric in the foot. So all I can do now is I have to take the fabric out. So I have to put the machine, lift the foot and just adjust this. Now if it really doesn't want to come, this will come, but you can even take the foot off and then work on it at your leisure. And it's just that whilst I was talking, I'd got too much fabric in the foot. And it happens, it really does happen. So I'm steering from the back now, only so that you've got a fighting chance of seeing a bit more of what I'm doing. And as we can see, I'm back to the beginning. I haven't got the excess of fabric that I was worried about, and I can just sew this. Now, I know. and making sure that I've got nothing tucked under my feet, because that would be really bad, really, really bad. Okay, so the next job for me to do is to sew on the front pocket. Now, the front and the back of this design are exactly the same. The only thing that I have decided, not for any reason at all, is which is the front and the back, by putting the seam of the collar at the back. So, I've now got to take the front. So, I can lay it out. Let me make it look a bit more like a jumper. There we are. Okay, so I'm going to take the two seams here, I'm going to place them together, and I'm going to find the middle of this jumper. If we don't do that, it's going to look really silly in the end, and I've just marked that with a pin. I'm going to take my pocket, and I need it fluffy side up, and I'm going to fold it in half, and I can mark that with a pin. Okay, so I'm now there and there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this upside down, and in my centre line, so I'll remove these two pins, I will mark it with a pin. I know, so that's now, this line is where I'm going to sew, so that I'm going to be able to keep that a lot more straight, and it's going to be a lot more easy for me. Now, entirely up to you. We can pin every inch if you like. It's one of the things that some things on a garment that you sew for yourself, if it's slightly out, nobody would know except for yourself, because you made it. But this is going to be so visible because it's going to be right at the front. Alright, so I've got as many pins in it as I want. You know, don't be pressured into doing something you're not comfortable with in sewing, just because you've seen somebody else do it. Alright, I'm all lined up. I'm going to lower my foot and I'm going to sew to the next pin. Yeah, it's not complicated. With my hands, I'm making sure that I haven't got any excess. I always take my pins out. I know some people sew over them, but I always take my pins out. Okay, so one straight line, and I can feel that I've not got anything caught up underneath. A couple of reverse stitches. I don't want it to travel anywhere. I'm going to take that out, move that, lie that flat, and I've lied it so that the back is out of the way. I don't want the back, I don't need to worry about that. I'm going to fold my pocket over and I'm going to double check. If it's wrong, it's wrong, and I will do it again. Because the next step of this is I'm going to fold it over and top sew again. Now, I know, you could leave this pocket off, okay, but it was on the original jumper that I cut for the pattern, and there we go. So, I'm going to sew up the side, folded, and I'm going to fold the hem in, but I'm going to make these more as a sewing mark for myself. So I can put those pins in now, but if they fall out, I'm not even worried. I'm not worried at all. Now I need to do 1, 3. 1, 2, 3. I've made sure that I haven't pinned the back, because the thing about pinning and the thing about ironing is that it gives you confidence, but then if you've done it wrong in the pinning stage, you do have the problem of you'll sew it wrong. So, you know, and then you'll be gung-ho and you'll have an awful lot of stitches to unpick. And the whole idea is to not unpick anything. Okay, So what I did then was I took out my pin, I readjusted my fabric, I ignored what I did with the pin, but before I did that, I placed the fabric in a suitable position to start sewing by putting it under the foot. So I used my foot as a third hand. Now I've got loads caught up in my foot again, so I've probably got the wrong foot for this. Now it's up to you whether you leave a big loop of thread or you cut the thread and then put it back in again. I think it's probably easier if you do cut the thread, and then again it's whatever you're happy with. Perhaps I will loop the thread on the first one and then cut the thread on the first one and loop the thread on the second one. So I've not only removed my pin, I've double checked my work. Okay, I'm pulling it from the back only so that it doesn't get caught up, and I'm asking the machine to sew nice and slowly, and all the time I'm sort of sweeping it just so that I can feel that I've only got one layer of fabric and then another 2 layers of fabric. So that's done. A couple of reverse stitches, because it is a place where it's going to get a lot of wear. I'm going to make sure my needle's up. I'm going to give myself loads of thread so that my machine can then go on to the next stage. I'm lining up using my pin. I'm now putting everything, I'm relying on that pin to be in the right place, and then I'll just untuck it. So I reline that up and away I go. So down stitch just to save the machine, and then a couple of stitches forward. Okay, high wear, let's do a couple of reverse stitches. Now, other than trimming my thread, which is my favourite job ever, I have got a fully functional fleece with a pocket, and, you know, taking the time to make sure it was measured. I've got my sleeves the right length and the right width, which is more important, and I have my little jumper for putting on those cold mornings. And I do think it's a sort of fashion thing that I think we've outgrown dressing gowns, although I do have several, but yeah. So yes, when you're cutting round a pattern of another jumper, make sure that you give yourself hem allowance, sorry guys, and that you are quite happy. So I know, yeah, there's no way I can go back a bit further. I can give you another vertigo inducing sweep, but I am very happy with this jumper. So I'm going to trim the edges, and hopefully I'll catch you again. Thank you ever so much for watching.